All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, AI in ArcGIS, Empowering GIS Leadership with AI Assistance and Transparent Innovation. My name is Emily Reitz. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the National States Geographic Information Council, or NSGIC. If you're unfamiliar with our organization, NSGIC exists to advance effective national coordination of geospatial information by supporting state-level cooperation. We serve as a national forum for the development of capable and future-oriented geospatial leadership. And if you'd like more information on how to get involved, please visit our website, nsgic.org and sgic.org. Just some reminders today. Everyone's been muted upon entrance, and there will be time, hopefully at the end of the presentation, for Q&A. And if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to just put those into the chat at the end or perhaps during. We'll kind of feel it out as we go. They'll be read aloud and answered. And yes, this webinar will be recorded, is being recorded, and it will be made available afterwards. So an email will go out to all registrants with that information, and it will also be posted in the NSGIC knowledge base. So with that, I will turn it over to our presenters. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lindsay and Emily, for the opportunity to present. My name is Ismael Chivite. I work in Esri, and I want to share with you a few thoughts about AI in ArcGIS. Let me make sure I can share my slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of artificial intelligence in ArcGIS to help you understand what are the capabilities and how you can go about enabling your organization to use these features. I will do a few demos, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Now, if you have questions, don't hesitate adding them into the chat because maybe we can take some of those as we go along without having to wait until the end. I think this is going to take about maybe 40 minutes or so we should have, again, time for discussion. So let's go into these. I like to start thinking about what's our mission before going into technology. At least from the Esri side of things, our mission is to empower people and organizations to take a geographic approach to solve problems, to use maps to understand our world and improve decision making and collaboration through these maps and geospatial analysis. That's what we do. And that's why we use technology. We built ArcGIS, which is a very powerful GIS enterprise-grade technology. Now, ArcGIS and the technology we build in Esri has gone through many cycles of innovation over time, kind of like going from paper maps into maps in computers, in workstations, later in personal computers that we could all have at home. Then it came the internet, mobile computing, etc. So our mission in Esri is to use these technology advancements and apply them to GIS and geospatial technology to make GIS more powerful and to make it easier to use. I see artificial intelligence as part of this natural process of innovation. None of these cycles of innovation you see here were revolutionary. They were simply an evolution of GIS. And again, I see artificial intelligence in the same light. It's going to evolve how we work with maps, how we do analysis, how we expose this geospatial knowledge to colleagues. If you look at ArcGIS today and where AI is being implemented, there are three buckets that I will use as a foundation for this presentation. There is this bucket of GeoAI, AI assistants, and finally, AI agents. These are kind of the three big areas of my presentation. Both GeoAI as well as assistants and agents leverage artificial intelligence within what we describe as the AI framework in ArcGIS. The AI framework in Esri is kind of the means to make sure that when you do AI in ArcGIS, all your data, all the AI happens within ArcGIS. There is no data that leaks to third parties or other organizations. So you can use AI in a secure way. So let's start first describing what is this thing about GeoAI. GeoAI is really applying AI techniques to work with your spatial data for the purpose of extracting new data or analyzing data. When I say data, I mean imagery, tabular data, vectors, unstructured text, full motion video. All of these data sources can be leveraged with AI techniques to either create useful GIS data or to do analysis. And that's what GeoAI is all about. GeoAI is a collection of models and tools in ArcGIS that let you apply AI to your data. We have pre-trained GeoAI models that are published in the Living Atlas. They are focused AI models that help you, for example, detect objects in imagery or in point clouds. There are like 100+ models in the Living Atlas that you can download and use in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Enterprise. In fact, we have tools for you to refine these models for your own purpose and data. GeoAI is also about tools, geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro that again apply AI techniques to do things we couldn't do before. Classifications, predictions, multimodal machine learning, time series forecasting. I mean, many of these things we have been doing for years, but not with AI. The advantage of using AI is that you can handle more data and in different ways to create even better outputs. I won't go into the details of all of these models and tools because they have been in the product for a few years already. I'm not sure if you know, but it was as early as 2008 in ArcMap when we added the first tool leveraging machine learning. So many of you are using these models and tools already. Today, I want to talk more about AI assistants and AI agents because this is much newer. So AI assistants in ArcGIS are nothing to do about advancing the science of GIS, kind of applying AI to your data. The assistants are really about improving the user experience of the tools that you use on an everyday basis. So I'll give you an example here. We have an animation of ArcGIS Pro, just so you can see how they work. So when you are using ArcGIS Pro, for example, in this case, I want to search for a valve, a transformer, right? So here I'm kind of following the typical workflow where I find a layer in the TOC, I check or open the tool for selection of attributes, etc. Nothing wrong with that. Now we are jumping into the assistant. In the assistant in Pro, you can literally ask in plain English, find this transformer with this ID. And it will be the assistant that finds the layer, the tool, and helps you execute. In this case, I'm going to do another workflow here where you can see that in the table of contents, I have a number of layers, many of them. Some relate to low voltage, others to medium voltage. What if I say hide all lower voltage layers? The assistant goes through the entire TOC looking for the low voltage layers and turns them off right away. So a process that would have taken some time for me to kind of find the layers and manually turn them off, the assistant can do in a few seconds. And similarly with the initial example, think about all the geoprocessing tools we have. You can certainly find them and open them up and set the parameters, or alternatively, you can use the assistant to find them more quickly and even pre-populate the parameters on your behalf before you execute. On top of these, things that you have seen, the assistant in Pro does many other things. It allows you to explore the ArcGIS Pro documentation right from the ArcGIS Pro interface. You can create SQL through natural language, even knowledge graph cipher queries. In the 3.6 version, the assistant, which is at the moment in private beta, allows you also to do ArcPy code generation. So if you're familiar with ArcPy, the assistant essentially allows you to create ARPI code, again, through natural language. On top of all of this, the ArcGIS Pro Assistant is extensible. This means that as a developer, you can wrap your own business logic and expose it to the assistant so people through natural language can invoke your custom functions. This is done through the ArcGIS Pro SDK extensibility. I'm going to show you another assistant that we are working on. It's called the Item Details Assistant.
Ismail, sorry,
yes.
may I jump in here and ask a quick question from the chat? Yeah, so the question is, for the AI assistant, does that consume credits?
No. No. The assistants at the moment are in beta. Some of them are in preview. So we don't have a well-defined pricing model for them, but while in beta, certainly they don't cost credits. And we will do our best so they don't consume credits. I want to be upfront with that. Is that good, Dan?
Let me know, just respond in the chat if that addresses the question. All right, there we go.
Excellent. Okay, so here's another one. This is the Item Details Assistant. This is to help you complete the metadata of your items in ArcGIS. Metadata, as you know, is very important for discoverability, but also for effective use by AI agents. And we will talk about this later. So I'll give you a quick demo of this so you can see how it works. So I'm going to open my web browser here. You see I have a feature layer. And as usual, I created the feature layer. I gave it a meaningful name, but my summary is empty. The description is empty. I don't have tags for discoverability. It's pretty flat, plain in terms of the metadata. If I go to the data tab, you can see here that I have a number of fields. The aliases are really a duplication of the field names. They don't describe the fields, and some of them have kind of strings that are a little bit cryptic or even misleading, like this one, area. I don't have value types, right? So all of that we can fix with the Item Details Assistant. So here I can go and say suggest, and this is going to take the schema of my feature layer, and it's going to suggest the title, summary, the description, etc. This is going to take about half a minute. So I'm going to switch here to the fields, and then I'm going to select all the fields in my layer, and I'm going to click on suggest, right? So this is going to work with my fields to come up with display names, also known as aliases, descriptions, value types, and things like that. So let's go into the feature layer. This is where we are trying to get suggestions for title, description, summary, and tags. And this is the dialog, right? So you can see here the suggestion. I can revert to compare the original title and the suggested title. I'm going to go with this. And the same with the summary. The summary actually was empty before. Now we have something that says point data representing reported crime incidents in Los Angeles, including details on crime types, victim information, and case status. So it's really good. It looked at my database schema and came up with all of this information, overview, data content and structure, geographic coverage. It even came up with some tags. So I'm going to go and save this. And now my item has the title, the summary, the description, and even the tags set. I'm going to flip now to the fields. You can see in this dialog now where I have the field name, and now we have the display name, right? So as you can see, the display name is no longer a duplication of the field name. We even have a description and a value type set up when appropriate. So you can see here that it actually did a fairly good job. This one is kind of interesting, the area. I thought the area was about square meters, but actually it's the area code, right? So it figured that out and suggested an alias as well as the description. Of course, here my responsibility is to make sure that this is correct. This all has been created through generative AI, which may or may not create good results. I mean, it's our task in Esri to make sure that we set the appropriate guardrails and tests to do the best. But ultimately, you need to revise this, review, and if you are happy with this, select the fields where you want to update the aliases and descriptions, and then submit, which is what I just did. So I'm really excited about this new assistant. Again, it's in private beta, and you can actually join the private beta if you like and test it out. Not only in ArcGIS Online, but also with ArcGIS Enterprise 12.0.
So, Ismail, I think this is a good time to jump in and ask another question related to what you just showed, and that is, can you generate a similar set of metadata in desktop, so in Pro? Is there a similar capability?
Not at the moment, although it's in our roadmap. At this moment, this is only available in the portal app, in Online and Enterprise. But I can see how this could flow into the metadata editor in both Online and ArcGIS Pro. That's a great question. Thank you.
More to come. All right.
Yes, more to come. Exactly. Okay. Here's another one, ArcGIS notebooks. I'm not sure how many of you use Python, but Python is a very powerful language to automate everyday tasks, to do analysis and data engineering, like massaging the data. It's powerful, but it can be intimidating to write these scripts on your own from scratch. So the ArcGIS Notebook Assistant is there to help you generate, fix, and even explain existing Python code. So this is in private beta as well. Coincidentally, yesterday we had a session with early adopters to test. I'll play here this animation so you can see it in action. This is a notebook, okay? A notebook in ArcGIS Online. And in a notebook, you can write your own Python code to execute it as you see fit. Now, I'm going to play here so you can see that you can now go to code snippets, select the assistant, and then literally ask the assistant to generate code for you. So this is a very simple instruction, like I want to create a group in ArcGIS Online. How do I do that in Python, right? So you just state that in plain English, and then it suggests the code for you. Similarly, if you already have Python code, it can explain it, it can fix it if it is broken, etc. To me, this is a tool it's a productivity tool. It's also a good way to learn and break the ice with Python, just to get going. Sometimes, in my own experience, the code doesn't execute completely, but is so close enough to what I want that is a huge help for my tasks. These type of assistants leverage fine-tune AI models that our development team is creating to make sure that the code that we create is relevant to your geospatial workflows and works with the latest versions of the Python API. Similarly to the Python notebooks assistant, we have an Arcade assistant. And as you may know, Arcade is used across many different tools in ArcGIS to generate expressions for labels in your maps, to calculate values in columns, in velocity, so many places. So again, very powerful, but could be intimidating. The assistant is going to help you with that. We released an initial release of the map of the Arcade Assistant in the map viewer in June this year. And now we are progressively expanding the Arcade Assistant to other products. So in the October release of Online, it's now present in Scene Viewer. You can do field calculations. And next year, we will expand the Arcade Assistant to field maps, Experience Builder, dashboards, and Pro. Let me play this video, just so you can see how the Arcade Assistant can help you build arcade expressions to calculate values. This is new from the October release of Online. I will use the Arcade Assistant to calculate a couple of fields in this feature layer. This is a new feature that was added recently in the October release of ArcGIS Online in 2025. So I'm going to first calculate this depth value, converting from centimeters to inches. And then I'm going to translate all these values in the use field to Spanish. So let's start here with the depth. Calculate. I'm going to select Arcade as the language. I will not apply any filter. And here is where I can type in my Arcade expressions. Now, in my case, I'm going to click on the Arcade Assistant and then enter a prompt. For example, I'm going to say, convert value from centimeters to inches. The Arcade Assistant uses a fine-tuned model specifically designed to help you generate Arcade expressions within ArcGIS. It keeps the schema of your layers in context to generate the best results possible. Here's the output. It's very simple. Takes the depth value and then applies a factor. Now the syntax is pretty straightforward, but as you can see, it was pretty easy to do this with the assistant. This is the preview. You can see the original values in centimeters and the calculated value in inches. So with this, I can proceed now and run the calculation for the entire data set. Let's try another one. Next one, I'm going to go and look at the use field. You can see here that we have values in English. I'm going to translate them into Spanish. So in this case, I'm going to enter again my prompt, which is going to be as follows. If you encounter any of the following values, return translation to Spanish, otherwise return other. You can see here the different values. Those are the actual values that I know exist within the data set. Okay, and here's the output. Let's add it in here. And you can see in the output that, well, this looks pretty decent. It executes correctly. You can see the calculation here, original value, calculated value. Now, I don't quite like the code that was written. I find it a little bit difficult to read or to manipulate, rather. So I'm going to come back into the assistant, and then I'm going to say, please do not use if. Okay, so let's have a look and see. In this case, it's proposing different type of code. It's similarly working well, but the syntax is completely different. I really like it much better. I feel like this is much easier to manipulate and change. So I will use the Arcade Assistant. Okay, so hopefully you like that. We have so many assistants. I don't want to bore you to death, but the point here is to say there will be assistants throughout ArcGIS products to help you with all sorts of tasks, everyday workflows. And the intent of these assistants is not to really kind of get the job done. You are ultimately responsible. The assistants are, well, assisting you in your workflows. We have assistants in Business Analyst, in Survey 123, in Story Maps, in ArcGIS Hub, in ArcGIS for Microsoft Teams, in Pro, as you saw, for Notebooks, Arcade. You can see kind of our plans for release. Many of them, as you can see already, they are either in preview or in beta. So it's early times. We just want to make sure that these assistants do a good job before they go into general release. I want to spend a few minutes describing how you can enable these AI assistants in your organization.
Hey, Ismail, could I jump in?
Yes.
And maybe it's a good time to ask another question here real quick. And going back, yeah, perfect slide. So the question, this came a little earlier, was that enriching a layer is very powerful, but finding the variables to use in my workflow is very cumbersome. Can AI and ArcGIS help me find the input field names to use in my enriched workflows?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, I think it was kind of part of this demonstration where if you look at the expression that was created I never said, like in your natural language, you kind of ask for the question, and then the AI will look for the appropriate fields that need to be used to create the expression that you are looking for. So particularly when you have field aliases, the AI can do a good job, to identify the appropriate variables or columns to be used in your expressions.
Perfect. And then maybe related to that, is there a dummies hack to how to prompt the assistants or
Ah,
examples of how to ask the right question? Yes, prompt engineering, of course, is something that I think maybe we all need to spend a little bit more time familiarizing ourselves with. So
yes. In fact, if we haven't done already, we are about to release a blog that speaks about kind of techniques to create prompts for the different assistants. I think, it takes definitely a little bit of practice to understand the machine, and it comes with experience. In general, it's very it's very good at ignoring typos, for example. Like typos are not that important. It gets it. But you have to be precise with your questions. The more concrete you are, the better the machine can do. If you leave the question open, you are going to get answers that are all over the place. And I think of this as, well, if I have a person trying to help me and I give them general instructions, all I can expect is, general answers, right? I may not get what I want. The more precise I am with my instructions, the better the assistant will be with me, both the person and the machine. Okay, let me continue, Dan. But again, just let me know if I need to stop at any time. Okay, so these assistants, they are disabled by default. And this is important because there are still a lot of questions about AI and hallucinations and privacy of your data. So by default, generative AI in ArcGIS is always disabled. We do this because organizations are taking their time evaluating AI and allowing the use of AI within enterprise workflows. So unless you come as an administrator to the organization settings, you won't be able to use the assistants, right? As an admin, you need to come here and turn this on. Now, should I turn this on or not? Well, we have in trust.arcgis.com a new section. It's called Trusted AI, where you can find information about the guiding principles for Esri when implementing AI in ArcGIS. We have things like transparency cards and model cards that describe what AI models are in use, how Esri handles your data and your prompts, so you can really see, how things work and make your call about whether you want to use AI or not. So if you have people in your organizations that is in charge of allowing or disallowing AI, you want to send them here so they can find the information they need to make their own decisions based on your specific policy. Trust.arcgis.com and then go into Trusted AI. In Esri, we are doing our best to be transparent with what we do. And believe me, if you don't find the information you are looking for, you can, through this webpage, request more information. And we are constantly updating the documentation to help people make these calls. We have information about security in AI, privacy, transparency, how we handle fairness and reliability, as well as accountability. So there is so much information here to read. So I encourage you to have a look here. These are examples of the transparency cards for every one of the assistants. It's going to describe what's the purpose of the assistant, what workflows are out of scope, what are the key features, what are the models that are in use, if we retain your data, if we don't retain it, etc. Lots of info. Okay, so just to finish, I want to touch a little bit on this area of AI agents. I think, when I look at these three buckets, I see a lot of potential here to create new data in ways we were not able to do before with the GeoAI tools and models. When I look at AI assistants, I think about opportunities to not only boost the productivity of GIS experts on their everyday workflows, but also I see an opportunity to onboard new people into GIS more easily, kind of making it easier to learn GIS through these assistants. And when I look at AI agents, I see fundamentally two things. I see an opportunity to create more modern, intuitive, easier to use information products. And also, I see an opportunity to integrate geospatial capabilities with third-party applications. So on the first one, kind of creating better information products, I'm really thinking about how we create maps and GIS layers that other non-technical or maybe technical but non-GIS users can use. So here is an example of what this could look like. You're going to look now at it's called an agentic mapping application. In principle, it really looks like a GIS app. You have a big map. But on the side, rather than having many tools, you have a chat window. And through this chat window, you can ask questions about the information in the map. For example, what are the total number of water resources in Panama? And it gives you an answer based on your GIS data. How many of these water sources are springs as opposed to wells? It creates a filter, shows it in the map, and pops a textual response. Show springs used for farming. So again, the agent is figuring out what's the layer in the map that has this information, what's the appropriate field that defines the use. We can also do spatial queries. What's the spring with the highest elevation? So again, it's looking for that field, right, that contains that information. And again, back to the spatial queries, we are going to ask here, show domestic wells in a particular province. So it does a query against the provinces and the points and filters out the information. So this is what I mean by a more modern, more intuitive experience for exploring geographic information. As GIS professionals, we still need to put a lot of energy making sure that the data is correct, that is properly documented, set the right symbology. But when we bring these maps into the hands for other people, rather than using GIS tools, they can just use natural language to query that information. And that work is done with the AI agents. So let me talk here conceptually about what is an AI agent at a high level. An AI agent is basically a software component that, given a task, often through natural language, can make decisions on its own to solve it, but only using a predefined set of business rules, tools, and data. When you go and ask questions to ChatGPT, you are essentially asking or getting responses from this pre-cooked knowledge in GPT, right, that was built. This is different. The agent here is a software component that is given tools and business rules and data, and the answers need to come from this data through the tools that are provided to the agent. So the beauty here is that AI agents are using these language models not because of the knowledge encapsulated in the models, but because these models have reasoning capabilities, right? So with these reasoning capabilities, they use the right tools and data to solve the problems that you pose to them. Geospatial AI agents are a type of agent that has been specifically configured to handle geospatial tasks. These agents understand the foundational principles of geography, GIS tools, and GIS data. It's a type of agent that is a specialist on geospatial problems. So how does this relate to the agentic mapping application that I demonstrated? Well, the user experience of GIS has evolved over time. Back in the days, we were using AML in ArcInfo, right, to just get the job done. And then it came the graphical user interface with ArcView and et cetera, et cetera. Well, with the advancements in large language models, we can create now new user experiences based on natural language interactions. So a natural language GIS application basically allows end users to navigate and explore maps using natural language prompts. This is not necessarily the solution to all problems, but for some people, this will be kind of like fantastic. I remember back in the days with ArcInfo, when things moved from ArcInfo Workstation to ArcView, for some people it was great, for others it was blasphemy. It was not good for everybody, but in the end, I think these new user experiences always allow us to expand the reach of GIS. And there will be workflows where these natural language GIS experiences are the best possible experience for those workflows. So I want to go more like specific about, okay, what can I find in ArcGIS to build these experiences? So we are working on a new instant app template. It's called the Data Explorer Instant App. It allows you to configure this type of experiences that I demonstrated. I'll give you a very quick demo so you can see it live here. Let me see, I have, there you go. Okay, so here I have a web map. This is the Panama Water Sources web map that you saw before. You can see that I put the summary, the description, and if I go to the layers and I look at the fields, they are all properly documented. I did that because that helps the language models really understand better the contents of the map, the layers in the map to answer the questions that I may pose. So here is the feature layer that is used in the web map. And again, you can see the description, the tags, and all of this. Let me actually have a look at the data. And if I look into the fields, you will see that the fields have display names, they have value types, they have descriptions. So if I click on elevation, it says elevation in meters, super important, elevation above sea level in meters, right? So I took a lot of time documenting this to help the LLM find the best information possible. Okay, so next, once you have your web map with the correct data, correct layers, and the documentation, you can go and configure the Data Explorer app. So in this case, this might be familiar to you. This is an instant app configuration dialog. In here, I select the map I want to use, and then there are some specific properties related to layers. What are the layers in my map that I want to use to support questions? So I can select one or more layers. And then, as you will see here, let me go back on the chat text. I can add a greeting text. This is super important because in these chat experiences, if you don't tell people what type of questions they can ask, they may ask questions about something that is not related to the map. So this is very important to help people use the applications correctly. And then here I even have a chance to add a number of questions, right? Sample questions for people to really get information about the type of questions they can ask. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty much fairly simple. You basically generate embeddings. The embeddings is a process. It's almost like indexing your data in a database, right? Embeddings to AI is like indexes are to databases. It's a way for AI to take the information in your layer schema and make it useful to the large language model. And then once you have that, you basically publish. And once you publish your application, you can open it up. And this is what the application is going to look like. So I created an onboarding kind of dialogue. And then I added a welcome text, a few sample questions, and this is the actual map that I created. And now here you can start asking questions like you saw in the animation, and it will give you the answers. So that's the Data Explorer, again, early adopter at the moment. but the beta will be coming on in Q1 2026. I look at this as, again, an opportunity to create a new type of web mapping applications that could be more engaging for your own users to look at the information you are creating.
Hey,
The,
Ismail, sorry, is this a good
yeah,
time to ask a couple questions about Data Explorer?
absolutely.
All right. So the first that I wanted to throw out there is can the Explorer do calculations as well rather than a simple select? I think at a certain level we know the answer to that is yes. But in this case, they were asking specifically about finding the total kVA, so that's the kilovolt amperes of a transformer or transformers downstream of a certain point.
Mm,
So in this case, it sounds like we'd have to do some network analysis as well within the Data Explorer. So we'll throw
okay.
that one out there.
Yes, that's a great question. The Data Explorer is going to be very focused on doing basic filters and special queries, like you saw in this demonstration. When it goes into more advanced GIS analysis, it is possible, and I'm going to talk about it later with this thing called the agent builder, okay? But the Data Explorer itself will not be the answer, at least initially, to such advanced workflows.
Okay. Then the next one related to Data Explorer specifically is will it be compatible with screen readers and accessibility tools?
Mm, yes. Um, I would say yes. I see tremendous value on this type of applications to improve the web accessibility. So every time we release new features, we have a web accessibility team in Esri that is actually part of the dev team. So we do our best to adhere to web accessibility as much as we can, and it can only get better with these new experiences. So keep us honest there as well. If you have particular interest in web accessibility, please connect with us to highlight any issues you may encounter, because those are things that matter to us in the dev team.
Okay, the last one specific to Data Explorer is they saw the release is planned for Q1 of 2026. Is that both for online and enterprise?
Mm. Let me go back to the release plan. So this is only ArcGIS Online. In enterprise, things are behind. In 12.0, we have only one assistant, which is the item details assistant. The rest of them are going to be in online for a while until 12.2. And I think 12.2 is late next year. And the reason why enterprise is a little bit behind is because this technology is evolving so quickly that we feel like we don't want to put it too early, because then we have very few chances to make progress, right? With enterprise, like the updates, we want to update these quick when we find problems or when we bring new features. So online has a much more aggressive release cycle where we can bring these innovations quick. And once things start settling down a little bit, we will put them in enterprise, if that makes sense to you. Any other questions, Dan?
There are some more, but I figured we wait till the end to
Okay.
wrap up.
Okay.
Yep.
So, when we were talking about agents, I told you it's like, hey, there are two things with agents, right, that are important. Let me go back here. So there are two important things with agents. One is better user experiences. We just saw that. But the second aspect relates to interoperability. We are moving into a world where not only we will need to create applications for real people, like Data Explorer, we will also need to create or enable geospatial capabilities for AI applications. They are not people, they are AI agents, third-party applications that will require geospatial capabilities. So how do you do that? Well, in the past, we would create web services and use REST API, the SOAP protocol, or WMS and these OGC things, right? We always enable more like protocols in the geospatial services so different applications can communicate with us. Well, what's coming next is the protocol that is AI friendly, and that's called A2A. A2A is a standard protocol for AI agents to collaborate with each other. So in an agentic ecosystem, AI agents can collaborate with each other to solve tasks, and sometimes even without the help of a human. So these standard protocols are needed for Esri agents to talk to Google agents and to Microsoft agents. Some agents might be specialists on, I don't know, human resources or CRM or weather forecasting. Well, we are building in ArcGIS the geospatial agents that can be combined with these other agents to solve more complex problems across the organization. So again, like I said, just like we share GIS web services today via REST and OGC protocols, we are going to start sharing geospatial agents through A2A. So this, again, is I think, a great opportunity to bring these geospatial capabilities to other workflows in our organizations. So how do you create these geospatial agents? Through tools like Agent Builder. So Agent Builder is a visual environment where you can connect agents with each other, and you can build agents that use geospatial tools to solve problems. Agents are really about orchestrating different tools and data sets to solve problems. And again, that's what you do through Agent Builder. Through this tool, not only you can put together the workflow, you can define the intelligence of the agent, but you can also test the agent to make sure it's working appropriately, and you can deploy it. You can deploy it as an agent that can be used from tools like, in the future, Data Explorer, Experience Builder, or third-party tools via A2A. So this goes back to the question before about, I want to run downstream analysis on my utility network, and I want to do that through this agentic application. Well, you go to Agent Builder and you say, I want to create an agent that specializes on doing downstream analysis on this particular utility network. And then here is my utility network. Here's my GP service. This is what, the steps that the agent should follow to solve the problem. And then once the agent has been deployed, you can register it with, say, Data Explorer. And Data Explorer, when it gets a prompt from the user asking about downstream analysis, instead of using the out-of-the-box agents for mapping, for example, it will call your own agent to solve that problem and execute your GIS logic. Yeah. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So all in all, and this is my last slide, we can jump into the Q&A then. I wanted to show you the different areas in Esri where we see potential to make GIS more powerful and easier for everybody. A little bit of GeoAI, tools and models, a review of the data assistants that are currently in the works, but very soon next year, we will start releasing them. And of course, the upcoming era of AI agents for kind of agentic applications for people, but also AI agents for complete automation into agentic ecosystems. Just a reminder that I don't care if you use AI in agents, assistants, or GeoAI tools. All of those AI things have a foundation in the Esri AI framework, which consolidates the different language models and AI skills and AI agents and tools that really bring to life all of this functionality. The AI framework is part of ArcGIS. So just like your data is secure within your ArcGIS organization, these AI capabilities also run within your ArcGIS organization.
All right. So thank you, Ismail. Hopefully, you've all had a sense that, for one thing, these capabilities are evolving rapidly. So that leads us into one of the questions from earlier. If my organization is using Enterprise 11.x, what AI features are still available? Hmm.
GeoAI tools, but assistants and agents, zero.
Okay. So they're
Yeah.
going to have eventually 12.0, right?
Yeah, eventually you need to upgrade enterprise for sure. I mean, if you are really, really interested in building AI agents, for example, we do work with older versions of enterprise through Esri professional services. So it's not like, oh, I am in ArcGIS Enterprise 11, I cannot create an agentic mapping application. No, that's not the case. You can still build these applications. But if you are looking for out-of-the-box functionality like the assistants or the data explorer application, you have to be on the latest versions of the software.
Okay. This is going back to the demonstration looking at the notebook, and that is if I have a notebook of codes, can the AI assistant give me a summary of what the code will do?
Yes. Yes. You literally go into your notebook and you bring your code into the assistant and say, describe this code or explain this code, and it will describe it. It will explain it.
All right. Let's go working through here. There was one I know I wanted to make sure we tried to address. All right, here we go. We have restrictions in our organization based on which AI interfaces are allowed. Are the AI assistants built off of a different AI platform, in other words, ChatGPT versus Claude, or is Esri building their own?
That's a great question. So the assistants specifically, for the most part, are using AI models hosted in Microsoft Azure. As you may know, ArcGIS Online uses Microsoft Azure infrastructure to run feature services, for example. So similarly, the AI models that our assistants use are actually part of that infrastructure. Now, these models are like within the domain, the boundary of ArcGIS Online, right? So Esri and Microsoft have a partnership where when we use infrastructure in Azure, it's not shared infrastructure. It's like part of ArcGIS. Like there are privacy and security rules that sort of fence your data from everybody else in Azure. So similarly, the AI models that we use are hosted in Azure with similar security and privacy assurances.
Hey, kind of continuing on that theme of trust and transparency, is this AI compliant with CMMC standards? Um, so this is let's see here.
Mm. I mean,
And
Dan, I can tell you in advance, I do not know.
okay,
Okay, so what I would do is go to trust.arcgis.com, try to find the answer. Otherwise, if you don't find it, there is a link where you can ask questions and then just ask the question or contact with your account manager so we can get a response to
and
this.
I know who we'll make sure that that question
Get
is
answer.
we get that response out there. All right. Okay, here's another one. I think this is a really good one. Can these agents work with real-time or near real-time data sets with high volume of changes occurring every second, minute, hour?
Um, I mean, if you think about what these assistants do and these agents do, they on the fly are, you pose a question to them, you pose a problem, and they figure on the fly what tools and what data should be used to solve the problem. So ultimately, they are just querying the system. So if one of your layers is being updated every second, every minute, well, the moment we do the query, that moment we are going to get the answer. So it's not like sometimes people think that you think about GPT and how GPT is built and it kind of consolidates information. It's a snapshot in time, right? When the model is created and burned, it kind of has a snapshot in time of that knowledge. But this is not the case with these agents. Remember that the agents are used for the LLM models in agents. They are used for their reasoning capabilities to do these live queries on the fly. to your data. So in a way, yeah, they can work with highly dynamic information.
Great. All right, next one. When might AI assistant for metadata appear in ArcGIS Enterprise?
Which one? The item details
In
assistant?
the AI assistant for metadata.
That is 12.0.
12.0. All right.
12.0. And 12.0, if it has not been released, it should be about to be released. 12.0.
Right.
I
Moving.
don't know exactly the dates, but it's 12.0 gets released before the end of 2025. Yeah.
Okay. Will the ArcGIS Online instant apps be able to use AI assistance with feature services from on-prem Enterprise 11.1? Understanding that the app would be used on-prem. Hmm.
I don't think that is going to happen in our Q1 release in February. However, that will happen. Like, yes, the answer is yes. It give us some time to get that nailed. It will be done. Yes.
All right. What is the relationship between Model Builder and Geo AI?
No relationship.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, is there a published documentation diagramming examples of flow of data, say the prompt, the GIS attribute data, et cetera, through infrastructure and service tiers?
Mm.
So I think,
Yes, on demand, not publicly. If you go to trust.arcgis.com, I don't think we have published any, but on demand, working with our security team, we can disclose some of these diagrams for sure. They are part of our standard. When a team in Esri wants to implement AI, there are specific guidelines that they need to follow. And the security baseline process, right, for the teams includes the disclosure of such diagrams where you can see how the information is going, where it's being stored, how it gets eliminated, etc. So the information exists, but only is released on demand.
okay. Um, Next one, we'll try to take a couple more, and then I think we'll have to try to address the rest of these offline, Emily, if that makes the most sense, and we can make sure to get responses back to all of the questioners. But are there plans to allow AGO admins to enable certain AI tools instead of
Mm.
just turning them all on via the AI assistant? I know that's a question I've heard from numerous within numerous conversations.
Yes. So there are two in the next release of online. At the moment, it's a master switch. It's all or nothing. Okay. You also have the switch of beta. Like you can say, I want to use assistants, but only those that are in preview. I don't want to use the ones in beta, which have a lesser security baseline. But in the next release, we are going to add an option. It's a new privilege in a role. So you can, if you want to release assistants progressively within your org, you can say only people with the AI assistance role can use assistants. That's one level. And the other level of granularity that we have heard about is I want to choose which assistant. I want to use Survey 123, but I don't want to use the Pro Assistant, for example. That is in our radar, but we haven't made a decision as to whether we can implement it or not. Okay, so
Okay.
for now, role-based access will be enabled in the next round, next update, February.
Okay. We'll take this last one. When will it be available for Experience Builder? And will it be able to help with app layout and widget configuration?
Okay. So I think this question relates more to the process of creating the
Hmm.
Experience Builder application. It's an assistant for me to create the Experience Builder app. I cannot give you an answer with any level of certainty on that because I have been meeting with the Experience Builder team and they have been thinking about it. But until I see like something concrete and a release plan, nah, I I can only say that it's in their mind to do, but I haven't seen like a focused effort to say we are going to get this done by June, right? So I think that will be a continuous a discussion to be continued.
Another of the stay tuned. All right. So, like I mentioned, we do have some other questions that were in the chat. We'll do our best to make sure we have all those questions captured and make sure we get back to get back to everybody with a response.
Yeah. So what I would suggest, Dan, is that I'm going to spend like an hour or so going through questions, put and add a few slides to the presentation, to the slide deck. And then I can share the deck with you and Emily and Lindsay, and you figure out how to share it with the audience.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. We are 1 minute over.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation and amazing Q&A. Very much looking forward to getting those slides. So I'll make sure to send you the questions or send those to Dan, definitely. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending today.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.